Real estate, real estate, real estate. Such a lucrative yet diverse industry. And for Dan, his experience really starts at age 16, where he was managing a portfolio of real estate for his boss, who took a lot of vacations, but ultimately Dan was able to learn a lot, and how that really propelled him to buy his first duplex in Ohio, where he's from, but now living in Colorado Springs. And we even got into the conversation about how he does a lot of deals and how he has a lot of property and has a lot of real estate in places where he's never even traveled to and never even been. And to me, at first, that sounded a little bit far-fetched, but once you started to talk about things like a due diligence sheet and just other deals and other ways and resources, it really wasn't that complicated. But also, patience is truly the name of the game when it comes to this and what he does with front range land. Because while he said about 20 to 30% of the deals are done quickly, which means about a 2-week time period, a lot of their deals, even one of their biggest deals that they did last year, required 9 months of follow-up, but it yielded them nearly 80 grand. So are you willing to wait it out? Because they do say patience is truly a virtue. But without further ado, enjoy episode 177, Time is Money. What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner. Well, for one, I just found out me and Dan are the same age before we started this interview. So I'm actually really coming into this one just a lot more excited, a lot more enthusiastic about what we're here to talk to you about. Not to say that if he was any older or any younger, I wouldn't still come with the same energy or just the same smile that y'all see right now. But, just being able to resonate on that level, being able to touch up on that, I love that a lot. But I really love why he's here today. I really feel like this topic that we're going to get into today, I really feel like everything that he's been able to do, everything that he's doing, and even things that he's going to be able to teach and learn with you guys along the way, I think is crucial. I feel like we've gotten a lot of questions about this. I feel like we talk to a lot of people in some capacity in this industry on the podcast. And the fact that everybody does a little bit of everything and everybody's kind of scattered all around, but everybody's still eating, that's my favorite part. So before we get into all things, Dan, how are you today? How are things on your end?
I'm great, man. It's fall in Colorado, which is beautiful. It's my favorite time of year, and it's been productive in business. So I'm doing well, man. How about you?
I'm pretty good, man. Like I said, whenever I get to connect with the like-minded, I'm always very happy, always very enthusiastic. So I really just have to thank you for, taking the time to want to connect and want to come on down to business and bless my audience just the same. But no, shout out to Colorado, man. I definitely was just talking to some friends about getting back out there. It's definitely been some time, like pre-pandemic time, since we've been out there, and the views were immaculate. So I definitely want to come back. I definitely want to, as somebody who was not a fan of cold weather or winter, it was definitely a great time when we were in Colorado, and it was not that bad when we went out there. So sending you love and sending you blessings just the same. So now, before we get into all things that you do, look, I know that we're going to have some people from my side. I know we're going to have some people from your side, but we're always going to have my favorite, and that's newcomers. So that's people really tapping into this episode, finding out about us somehow, some way. So to bring everybody up to speed, to get everybody on the same page, on one accord, can you, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then can you, two, just tell us what brings you on the Down to Business podcast today?
Sure. So starting with the first question, Dan Haberkost, I'm 27. I live in Colorado Springs, originally from Ohio. And I started working, in the context of business here, I started working pretty early. We didn't have much money. I joke that I grew up in a cornfield in Ohio, but I literally grew up in a cornfield in Ohio. And so I started working in high school. And by the time I was 16, I was managing a farm and a portfolio of real estate for my boss while he would go to Aruba for most of the year. And he was getting a great deal there. So anyways, I started working young. I did that through high school, started some side businesses, did landscaping on the side in the summers to help save up money for college. And then in college, the last 2 years, I worked full time at somebody else's landscaping company, managing a big portion of the residential side of the business. And I was doing that along with full-time school. And that was not fun. I had no life. Weekends were entirely school, right? Getting all my work done because during the weeks I was working. And around 20 years old, I said, okay, this hasn't been great. I haven't had a lot of fun in college like my friends have, but I know how to manage people, how to run businesses. I'm already making a middle-class income. How do I take this and create, put myself ahead as I get close to graduating here? And so I started reading about different books, investing in real estate, so on and so forth. And like everybody else, it was when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was like the light bulb moment. I said, all right, real estate it is. So at 21, I bought a duplex. I was still living in Ohio. That duplex I still own today. It's in Parma, Ohio, for anyone who knows where that is. And shortly after, I came to visit my brother in Colorado Springs because his wife's from here, so he lives here. And I didn't want to stay in Ohio, and I loved it here. I love the outdoors, the mountains, the sunny all the time. People are friendly. So I moved here, And I said, I'm going to build a real estate business and go climb all the mountains. And so bought another house hack when I moved out here. So I was 22. And that was great. I was living for free. Plus the rental income was covering gas and food. And so I was in a good spot. But I was still working a job. And I hated working for somebody else. I couldn't do it. And so I decided, all right, number one, I don't want to work for someone. But number two, if I want to buy a lot of real estate, I need to figure out how to make a lot of money. With a middle-class income, it's hard to buy a lot of real estate. It takes a long time. So that's when Front Range Land eventually came from. So I met a developer here at the local real estate group who had been doing land and development for the last 40, 50 years. And he lives an hour south of Colorado Springs. And every weekend I would drive down there. I'd help him in his business and learn from him in the process. And, 6 years later, I've taken his business and just made my own. And so Front Range Land is my active day-to-day business, which is all land and development. And quite simply, it's a giant marketing, direct-to-seller marketing company where I take the deals we get, and some of them we just buy and sell. Sometimes I'll sell them on terms. Sometimes I'll put new construction on them and then sell the house or duplex. Working on some subdivides right now. And so that is the cash printing machine that then I take and put into additional rental properties. So that's where I'm at now. I'm 27. I've done hundreds of real estate deals. And to your second question, why am I here? Well, a couple reasons. But one of the biggest, quite frankly, is I've recently started a podcast with one of my buddies who was a former hospital CEO and now real estate investor. And so I like to promote that, the big picture blueprint. But I also just like meeting people like you, getting the word out there. It's amazing the people I've met all around the country just from doing podcasts like this.
I have to definitely echo that last point just because, the power of podcasting is crazy, and it's really crazy just to see the relevance of it now. Yeah, I tell people all the time that, I'll be celebrating my 4-year journey late November. And it's just crazy to think 4 years ago, back in 2019, that this was, I couldn't really count the numerous amounts of podcasts that I could now. I couldn't really see it all the time. And I'll talk to some business owners who they come on with one brand like yourself, and you find out they have a podcast, which is another brand in itself, just the same in the fact that they're able to connect and merge the two. I always love that. But okay, I'm really hearing quite an extensive history with you, quite an experience, but quite the dedication to it, quite just realizing that, there were some sacrifices that you had to make. There were some things, like you said, while your friends were out having fun, living the life, doing the collegey things, everything of the sort, you were more so probably still kind of in some capacity having fun and doing things, but you also had a lot of responsibility. You also had to make sure that, look, I saved up to be here right now. And I feel like, versus when loans and refunds are not involved or things like that, when it's coming from your pocket or your savings or your work, you view it and you value it a lot differently. And I can definitely tell that from you. So now, okay, the thing that interests me the most about real estate is that there's so much that you can do with it. Like you said, this went from you meeting with a land developer just driving up every week and meeting with him and helping him with his business to now you're 6 years later, you've been able to kind of scale in a different level. And now you've also been able to use that money that you're scaling, whether you buy on terms, everything of the sort. You can also take rental properties under your belt, which then still bring in another income for you. All right. So when it came to specifically Front Range Land, when you started it, when you really just came into business, did you have a set goal in mind? Because I feel like, from just what you said about your history, about being in Ohio, about moving out and everything like that, I could tell that you were in a lot of different places, a lot of different spaces. You were seeing different opportunities here and there. When you started this business, did you really want to hone in and focus on one particular thing? Did you kind of realize that real estate is such a vast industry that why should I limit myself? I kind of want to be that Swiss Army knife that does a little bit of everything. What was your mindset early on?
Yeah, that's a good question, because early on I was trying to do too many things at once and failing at pretty much all of them, not getting a lot of traction. And so that would be my biggest piece of advice to myself, 4, 5, 6 years ago, is just pick one thing that you want as your active day-to-day business and scale it, because you can make millions of dollars in anything. I could go, start a business outside of real estate, but I can't start them all, right? And so I wish I would have just picked the land and development space and only done that, right? But no, I did try too many things, and it took me a while to get substantial traction because of that.
I think that's really a great point that you make, and the fact that you were able to reflect on that. That's amazing, because I feel like, if we all take some steps back in our journey, in our entrepreneurial business ownership journey startup or anything like that, we may also feel like at one point we either one, we're just doing too much, maybe bit off a little bit more than what we could chew, or just had a lot on our plate and really trying to balance and juggle it all. But really still, I feel like too, when you first come in, you're motivated. You have that fire lit under you. You just want to do every single thing that you can. You got a board full of just things and you want to just check by check by check by check. But like you said, if sometimes we can just erase 7 of those 8 things, take that one and just go all in on that, then we can get to the 2 and the 3 and the 4 and make it all the way down to the remaining 7. You know what I'm saying? So I like that a lot. Now, okay. So with what you do specifically, break it down from, because you said some things in the beginning that I didn't necessarily understand, or that, you know, even going on the website, like I see that, you know, this is about more so being able to sell land without the hassle to people that you trust, to people that are not trying to, you know, backdoor you or just look at you as a check or an investment or anything like that. So with what you do, I feel like you already kind of gave us layman's terms, but as I kind of tell people, look, I want you to talk to me like a middle schooler or like a elementary schooler who wants to make some money right now, but does not necessarily know where to start. Or I heard what you said, I read the website and everything like that, but where do I fit in that part?
Sure. Okay. So Front Range Land, the website, you're going to see the outward facing side of the website for people that receive our marketing pieces that potentially are going to sell to us. So that's what that's for, just to be clear. And so, okay, starting at the core of it, it is all direct to seller marketing. So you've probably had, you know, people who call themselves wholesalers on the show for housing. Conceptually, I do the same thing where I market direct to seller. The difference is how I profit off of it, but we'll get to that. So I have all kinds of mailers going out, about 10,000 mail pieces every month, along with several thousand cold calls, because it's more mail than it is cold calls. And that gets, of course, a huge response of land sellers. And a lot of land sellers bought their land decades ago. They bought it, especially in somewhere like Florida, for pennies on the dollar. I mean, land has gone up so dramatically there in a lot of markets that they might have bought it for 3 to 5 to 10 cents on the dollar. And many of them are in a stage in life where they have a lot of money, but they don't have time. And so their priorities are different than your or mine might be, or your listeners, where they are happy to sell at a discount. And so let me give you an example. We got a deal in Cape Coral a few weeks ago, Cape Coral, Florida, and the seller disappeared for a few days. She talked to a few realtors. She looked at listing it. She goes, look, I don't want to deal with this. I'll just sell it to you guys. And so we got that at about 50 cents on the dollar because she had bought it for next to nothing like 10 years ago. And so one just to pause and pull a lesson out of that. Don't assume that everyone's perspective is the same as yours, because it's not. And people with a lot of money that don't necessarily have a lot of time prioritize things differently. And so that tends to be who sells to us. Someone that, thinking about land too, it's usually bought in cash. So if these people were able to buy land in a different state for cash 10, 20 years ago, they're probably in a really strong financial position now. Okay, so that's our seller generally. And that's who we buy from. And we buy land anywhere from 30 to 60 cents on the dollar, depending on what we're going to do with it. Once we buy it, we then dispo or profit off of it in a variety of ways. A lot of them we just simply buy and sell. Sometimes I'll sell it for cash. Sometimes I'll sell it for terms. I sold 2 in Palm Bay last month on terms. So that guy's going to be paying Front Range Land for the next 5 years or something like that. And for land, you can charge a significant interest rate. I believe those are at 10%. A lot of times it's at 12 or 14. Of course, check your state's usury laws. Now, on to the new construction, that's a whole nother way to make money on land. So just an hour south of me, where the developer who I learned from lives, is Pueblo West. And that has been an excellent market for building new homes. And we could really go down this rabbit hole if you want, or not so much, you tell me. But all the lots there are ready to go, infill, shovel-ready lots. And what that means is all of the preliminary work you have to do to get a piece of land to the point of being ready to build is already done. Water, sewer, power, gas, all right there. You don't have to extend utility lines, right? It's already zoned for residential. It's flat. It's simple. All that's done. And so it's a great market for spec homes or spec duplexes, spec builds. And so I'm building 4 duplexes down there right now, and then a single family home a little further south. And that can be another great strategy. If you put the right contractor in place, you can make substantially more money building, or you can even create rental inventory for you. I have a partner on those duplexes, and I'm actually seeing him tonight. I'm going to tell him, I think we should just keep these as rentals because these are brand new. And so anyways, that is another useful strategy of a way to profit off of land, is putting some sort of new construction on it. Okay. And then something I'm working on doing right now is subdivide. So east of Colorado Springs, you have all these, several hundred or 1,000 acre ranches, and to subdivide to 35-acre parcels is very, very easy. You pay for a new survey, a new plat to be created, for, depending on the size, it could be $3,000 to $5,000 to $10,000. You record it, and voila, you've done your subdividing. It's a whole different process if you're only going to 35-acre parcels. If you're going smaller, totally different. And so I'm working on getting some of those, because that's another very simple value add strategy, to take a big piece of land, chop it up, and then each piece is going to sell for a lot more collectively than if you had just sold the land as it is. So those are just a few of the strategies with land, but that very simply is what front range land is. It's go direct to seller via marketing, buy land at a discount, and then profit off it in a variety of ways. And that is what feeds the passive rental property investing.
Wow. I like that. Wow, man. And like I said, I feel like you were only scratching the surface as to what it is, like what you've really done. But something that I'm also hearing, so I've heard a few things in that, but something that kind of comes to mind immediately is that essentially you are trying to, as much as you can, to cut out the middleman. You don't want something that I've kind of learned with real estate is that there can be a lot of different processes where middlemen are there. And I've talked to a lot of the different people who I've talked to pretty much have gotten it to the point where they don't want that anymore. If they can take on more, if they can just learn a little bit more, if they can partner with somebody who they trust or who is not going to steer them wrong or anything, they will do that just the same. But something that I'm also hearing, so I want to clarify this. So when you say land, we're talking about strictly acres of things. We're not talking about properties, houses, anything like that. We're talking about all just land that you then buy or either sell, and then you decide. Well, obviously, if you sell it to whatever they decide to do, but if you're buying this land, you then get to decide what's done with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So with front range land, there are no structures on these pieces of property. It's just vacant land.
Got you. Okay. So now I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. So is there because I think about me personally being raised in New York, born in New York, raised in Philly, excuse me.
Okay.
I feel like I didn't really start seeing land like we're talking about until I went down south to like your North Carolinas, South Carolinas, the deep South, everything. Now being in Florida, obviously it's everywhere. So when you said Cape Coral, that's why I kind of my eyebrows went up a little bit because I know a little bit about Cape Coral. But all right, for people, for these city slickers out here, for these northerners, or for these people who can't think of where they could find an acre, let alone 2 acres, 35, anything like that, is there like a specific place that you start? Is there like a resource? Is there like a database? Like how? Because me personally, let's just say I wasn't the host of the Down This podcast. Let's just say I'm tapping in as a listener, and let's just say, well, wow, I come from a place where we buy properties. I didn't even really know that you could get into land. How do we then do that? And the reason why I asked that question too is because I've talked to people who, well, no, I'm not even going to. Let me get into that on the next question. So I pretty much want to know right now, how do you do this? Like, how do you sort of obviously coming from Ohio, coming from Colorado, you've probably seen different landscapes, different trajectories, like that. But how can someone who considers themselves just a city, New York City, Times Square, and downtown, anything like that, how can they really start to find and begin to purchase land?
Sure. So I will say a lot of what I buy is 10,000 square feet, a quarter acre or 0.2 acres, because again, it's that infill product where a lot of the lots are already built out. They already have homes. And then, there's one vacant lot there still and one there. So it's not a lot of acreage. That's more new to me, the big stuff, the big acreage. But, Manhattan, New York City, of course, that's built out. But most cities do have some amount of infill land left that's never been built. So that is an option. One interesting strategy, I know of people doing this up in Denver where it's very built out, is finding the old dilapidated houses in areas that have gotten expensive, where new builds are going up. You can buy it and then scrape it, right? Knock it down. And then for all intents and purposes, there's a vacant lot to put a new home on. So really you could do the strategy in a developed city that way, if there's an area that's really growing. Of course, there's a little more complexity there. But aside from that, you can do this remotely. I am doing this in a lot of places I have never been. So I've been all over Florida, but I've never been to North Carolina or New Mexico. And we're doing business in both those places. And so what I think about is I would rather it be more competitive on the buy side than on the sell side. So I thought, all right, where in the country is everyone going? Southeast is a good portion of it. North Carolina, Florida. You're one of those people that came from New York and then went to Florida. And if you look around Florida, you just go on Zillow and land sales in the last 30 days. I mean, it is crazy. Land is just selling like crazy down there. Same with North Carolina. So you can just, throw a dart and pick really any market. And you can do this. Granted, Florida is very competitive. But all that to say, the simple answer to your question is you don't have to necessarily do it in your backyard. You can do this elsewhere.
Dan, I don't know if anybody's ever told you if you have superpowers or not, but you might have read my mind, because that was the question that I kind of cut myself off on and didn't ask, but you kind of started to tease it a little bit. All right, so now that was my follow-up. One, what you said, I like that a lot, especially the dilapidated route, because I didn't even really think about that once you take these properties now that people are just trying to get rid of. It's an eyesore. Yep. They don't want to touch it anymore. It's too much. It's going to take way too much to bring it back to life than what I put this on for. And then once you have that, you scrape it, it's yours now. So, okay, that's a good key. But now, I've talked to a couple of, I feel like all the real estate, I'm going to call them gurus in the sense that I've talked to these guys, because they know everything. I'm going to call you a guru if you could just spitball that information that to me. So everybody who I've talked to has always touched on the idea of not working in their backyard, of being in all these different spaces and places. So obviously by now, I believe it. I'm not to say the first couple of people that told me I didn't believe it. The success spoke for itself. But now to just hear people time and time again amass so much success in a place where they really don't live, that's amazing to me. How does that work for you, though? Like, how do you, like you said, you've never been in North Carolina. Well, I need all my North Carolina followers to tap in, because I went to undergrad in North Carolina. So I spent 4 years of my life there. So a lot of my audience, honestly, the biggest state of my audience is North Carolina. PA is the next. With everybody doing what they do, with you never being there personally, how do you ensure that this process is still done 100% correctly? How do you ensure that the land is what it is? How do you ensure that people are not kind of just selling you something, sending false advertisements or anything like that? Because I've talked to some people who have connects in different places. So they have people go out there and check on it or do different things like that. But I've also talked to some people who they still just do all of this. And they've not, like I talked to a guy in San Diego who he said he's never conducted an ounce of business in San Diego, but he's been in so many different spaces and places. So for Dan, for Front Range Land, for everything that you're doing, how can you do this remotely?
Sure. So, 95% of it just with a generic due diligence sheet. Once you've done business in a few markets and a bit of experience, you can figure just about everything out. But there's a big but there. There's always interesting, pitfalls or things that can trip you up in new markets. In Florida, you got to watch out for endangered turtles. Or I'll give you another example. So where I build in Pueblo West, Colorado, a lot of the lots require septic, and you get a soils test done with the health department, and they'll tell you what sort of septic you can put in, and it can be more or less expensive, but it's never a yes or no. Where I'm doing business in North Carolina, it's a yes or a no. So if you don't know that, if you're operating off of what you thought was the norm in Pueblo, and then you go to that market in North Carolina, you could get in trouble. And so the way that we've solved for this is looking around, finding the realtors that are selling a lot of the land, because usually there's a few people dominating. I've found that consistently. It's very much like the 80-20 or maybe the 95-5 rule. And asking them, hey, Tamar, we do a lot of land and development here in these markets, Colorado, Florida, et cetera, but we're new to this market. And is there anything we should be aware of that could make land worthless or really expensive to build that we might not know being new here? And then usually that solves it for us. And then number two, one other thing is if, again, speaking to land consistently, if you look at a bunch of listings, you'll quickly find out what's on everyone's mind. So in that North Carolina market, every listing in an area that doesn't have sewer, at least, it says, oh, perk test on file, perk test on file. Oh, okay, so maybe that's really important there, whereas it's not as important in Pueblo. So talking to the realtors and then just looking at a lot of the listings is how we've determined what is specifically important in that metro. And then we have a big market-specific due diligence sheet with, on top of our normal due diligence, in Palm Bay and Palm Coast and Lehigh Acres, what do we need to be aware of?
Dan, it's so crazy because, like, I feel like when I'm asking these questions, I'm just like, I'm really thinking hard myself. Like, so what is he about to say? Like, what is he's about to give me? And then you just start talking. I'm just like, wow, that was so simple, yet it makes so much sense. I love one of the biggest words here, like, is simplicity. I love just when things are easy. And I feel like my followers love that too. Like, they want to listen to an episode. They want to be like, okay, I just got off with Dan. I'm about to go make some money right now. You know what I'm saying? But no, that's interesting because like you said, that's a simple, that's a network. That's a connection. That's just you talking, you going that extra step. And then who knows, by you even doing that, by you even kind of following up with them, like you said, these people are dominated. So they know just more than what you're doing there. That may even lead to another connection. That may even lead to, hey, I actually like this business and what we did here. How about I'm actually doing something over here? And then little do you know what that could do. Because sometimes it's really just about asking those questions. I feel like we can Google, we can call around, we can do this, we can do that, we can have people go do it. But sometimes it's just best to just go straight to the source. This person might not be the end all be all, but for right now, they're going to be able to provide me with what I need. And then I combine that with what I already know, compare it to other markets and things like that. Because like you said, I feel like time and time again, people will operate in one market or operate in a certain space or area and just think that that applies everywhere. And little do you know, like you said, that you get to Florida, man, there's so many different things that you have to worry about here. Like so many different things that I didn't even, there's a type of bird out here that I found out if you hit it, it's a sandhill crane. If you hit this bird, you're going to jail. You're getting a fine. You're going to. I said, wow. And I used to drive for Amazon, and these birds would just they're as tall as us, if not taller. And they're in the middle of the street, looking at you, just cool. And then I see a sign that says you will be. I had no, so it's just, but that just goes to show that, there are so many things sometimes behind the scenes that we don't really realize or we don't really think about until we start asking those questions, until we experiment, until we get that experience. Because I'm sure with you, like this wasn't just something that, you worked in the market for the first time. You just got everything you needed to know. No, it took a second time, a third time, a 10th time. It took that over and over to the repetition to the point where now you're probably starting to even work with people and you're like, and they're kind of surprised too. They're like, oh, wow. I think Dan and the guy, they know what they're talking about over there. Have you done this before? Where have you, where else have you been? But it takes that due diligence, that experience, like you said. All right. So now, so we got that now. So for somebody, I would say like, somebody listens to this episode. Somebody says, hey, Dan, I feel like you laid a great foundation. One, what you're doing, obviously you've been in this, like you said, just in 6 years of building that business, you've done a lot. But even before that, you were in it. You were getting experience. You were taking care of your boss's portfolio while he's just, taking back somewhere with a cocktail or something. So somebody listening to this episode, somebody says, Dan, I feel like you laid it all out. I feel like this is not really hard. I have some money, but I'm not really sure how much money I need or where I need to go or what I need to do. It's not necessarily to say that I want to come into this as an LLC right away. I just kind of want to start getting into it. Where do I start? What can I do? Do I need a certain threshold? Do I need to have like a rainy day fund? Do I need to have things to invest? Do I need to start making calls? I heard you talk about, you said you had 10,000 mailers going out a month, 7,000 cold calls going out a month. How do I do that? What is a cold call? How do you get mailers? Is this physical mail? Is this are these newsletters? Where do I give me a foundation as to how somebody could say, hey, I want to get into land selling. I heard Dan's episode. I want to start today.
Sure. Okay. So first and foremost, make sure that you are absolutely clear or that you've decided you want to do this for the long term. Because I'll tell you, a lot of the deals we get are 6 months after the initial contact with the seller. That happens all the time. Not always. Sometimes we send out mail and 2 weeks later we get a call and we get it under contract. Sometimes. But that's probably 20% of our deals, maybe 30%. Our best deal this year, we made almost 80 grand on a land flip. And I'll tell you, my acquisition manager has been following up on that for 9 months. So first and foremost, if you're not committed, don't bother. You have to be committed for the long term. Okay, from there. Now, I have learned the building, right? There's the new construction, and then there's just the simple going direct to seller and flipping land. The new construction I learned by helping for free a guy for a long time every weekend. You can do that. You can donate your time, find a problem that somebody has who knows what you want to know and help them with it, solve that for them and learn from them in the process. Or when I'd already started with the new construction, but I didn't have the systems and all those questions you're asking, where do you pull the data and how do you send the mail and that sort of thing. I wanted to figure that out. So I just paid a buddy of mine who, I don't know if you know Brent Bowers. He's a decent name in the space now. I paid Brent years ago because he used to live out here and host the real estate group with me, just for his systems, for him to teach me. And so those are the two ways that I have learned new skills, both the construction and then just going the direct to seller for land. One, I paid with my time, but no money. And one, I paid with money and much less time. So those are two routes to go. I mean, you can learn a lot from listening to podcasts and YouTube and just trying to execute yourself. but I would at least find someone that you can get feedback from, because you're going to waste a lot of time going that route. Wait, let me say that right. You're going to, if you only try and go off that route, you're going to mess up. You're going to make these mistakes that you could very easily not have made. Podcasts and YouTube are very useful. I still listen to podcasts and watch YouTube videos today. That's not my point. I just would do it in conjunction with finding someone who's where you want to be.
I got that. I like that a lot. I feel like there's no better way sometimes learning that real life example, like you said, putting that time and putting that grunt work in. It's not always going to yield monetary results, but it'll yield results. It'll yield knowledge. It'll yield even that person saying, okay, wow, I can trust this person, or they're really dedicating their time. They're not really expecting anything. They're asking questions. They're being due diligent. I would be remiss if I didn't, because then it could come to the thing of, y'all begin to teach one another. Y'all begin to learn from one another. Y'all begin to go in on things together. And then eventually when you go in by yourself, or you decide to just go your own lane, you'll have a connection. You'll have somebody to bounce ideas off of. You'll have somebody to tell you, this is the route. This is not the route. Okay. Now, do you feel like there's any area, or there's any state, there's any place that you steer away from? Do you feel like there's any place that you've had like bad experiences with, just things that, you haven't gotten not so great reviews about? Or do you just feel like the possibilities are endless? The world can be your oyster with this.
I would tend to think or agree with number two, that you can make it work anywhere. But I mean, that's not to say there are certainly better and worse places. And again, this is just a matter of opinion. I prefer to be in the markets where it sells overnight, very easy to sell, but then I tend to have a lot of competition on the buy side. I prefer that relative to, one of my close friends does a lot of business in areas where it's a bit harder to sell. It takes a lot longer, but he has far less competition on the buy side. So that's just my preference not to go to those places. So, you mentioned the guy in San Diego, which I'm guessing is Pete Reese, potentially. But, okay. Anyways, point being, you can go do business in San Diego if you want to. I have a buddy out there who owns a big brokerage, and he invests at, some out there, some elsewhere. So you can make it work anywhere if you really want to.
Damn. How'd you know that?
It's such a small world. I feel like I hear Pete's name. I don't know him super well personally. I believe we follow each other on social, but I'm like, oh yeah, I think he's out in San Diego. Someone else just mentioned him on a podcast I was on or something. So I figured it was him.
Yeah, Land Conquest. So he came on the podcast, The Love for Land, and it was a really good episode. But he was somebody who, he just dropped his training program not too long ago. So I've actually been kind of going through that too. So now I'm about to piggyback some of this information that you're giving me with that, and then we're about to just work all the way through. But dang, well, that just made my day. Oh, that's good. That just also goes to show you when you're really on your grind, when you're really doing your due diligence, how you can just rattle something off like that. I want some people now listening to this episode, rattle me off some popular names from your industry, and let's cross check them with the podcast. No.
It's such a small world. Have you had Ray Zhang on up in Jacksonville?
No, but I've heard of him though, just from being out here. I've heard of him too. But so now I might have to go get him too, just the same. But wow, you just said that. Wow, that just lit me up. I love that a lot.
Yeah.
But I love that. But like you said, it's also a true testament to you when you're listening to podcasts, that other podcast that he was mentioning on. You didn't even know prior to coming on that he was on my podcast. Because I think about when this podcast, like the inquiry came, we hadn't even talked to Pete then. So that's even funnier as to how like this really just all just played out. But no, that also just goes to show that, like you said, it's enough room for everybody to eat. And if he wanted to kind of flip it to San Diego, he could amass some success, him and his wife, and do the same thing that they're doing in San Diego. But I love even the route and just the other option, the alternative that you gave, just the same. So I guess now we've talked about, a lot of the positives, a lot of what can come from this, a lot of what it can do for you, how it can change your life, everything like that. What are the drawbacks? What are obviously I feel like there's a lot of time spent with this. There's a lot of, you talk about, I'm going to just keep bringing up those numbers because I'm a numbers guy, but you talk about 10,000 mailers going out. Talk about 7,000 cold calls going out a month. I could imagine that, getting that set up and everything. It's not just a snap, click, and a jump like that. You have to also work. You have to be due diligent. You have to know your market, where you're going, everything like that. So coming into this, obviously being in this for quite some time, but still being young, like age young, because we're 27. We're not old. I don't care what nobody says. We're young right here. We're thriving and thriving. What are some of the things that you've noticed that, have kept you on your toes a little bit, have made you kind of dot your I's and cross your T's a little bit, or even some things that, you had to kind of take a step back and may not have been all of what you thought it was cracked up to be?
Sure. Well, like anything, when you hear me talk about it or anyone talk about it, it sounds so easy. It sounds so profitable. No, there are problems all the time. You're dealing with people. And on the seller side, you're dealing with unsophisticated people. So, you could run into all kinds of problems just with human personality. So you got that, right? You run into deed issues, title issues, well, along the line of what I just said, family disputes that then stop a transaction you thought was going to close. All kinds of problems come up every day. Shifty agents, right? Getting your real estate license takes about 5 minutes. So there's some great realtors out there that dominate, but then there's a whole lot of terrible ones, right? And they get listings too because they have family members that give them a chance, and they can be a problem. Another issue potentially with this business, and why I'm buying more and more rental properties, is it's not recurring, right? I mean, you can sell land on notes and then those pay me every month, but that's just an annuity that runs out. It's not like, an insurance business where you have a book of business that pays every month. So that's a drawback to it for sure. Let's see what else. It's always changing and evolving, right? There's always the chance of the market shifting dramatically, which will happen at some point, I'm sure, and land not being in demand, builders not building, and then you'll have to pivot. So that's a potential drawback of it. So there's certainly cons, just like there are to anything. But those are a few of them that come to mind immediately.
Got you. I could imagine this is a very people-oriented thing, like even to get to some things. But like you said, there are a host of different personalities with the good side, the bad side, all of them between. So I could, like you said, I could definitely imagine how that goes. But I love the point that you talked about how this is ever changing, and I love that because I feel like we are in a place now, we're in a space now where you can look at something now and a month from now it could be different. A year from now it could be unrecognizable. 2 years from now it could be something totally different. So with this game, with things always kind of changing, with property, with value, with the prices have been skyrocketing lately. Like for everybody out there paying rent, I know those renewals were looking crazy. Shout out to my complex though, because they did not hit us over the head with the crazy renewals. So I was very grateful for that, and the HOA people. So if y'all are listening, some our turn, right? Just let it. You can always decrease it if you want. But with this game, always, like I said, I feel like you have to just be in the know. Like you said, even being how far in you are, you're still listening to podcasts. You're still gaining knowledge. You're still learning, and you're never just becoming complacent with where you are. How do you continue to stay ahead of that curve, though? I feel like with certain industries, they don't move as abruptly or as quickly, or there's not too many changing, or a lot of the big players remain those big players for so long. But this could be a game where a big player could emerge overnight. A big deal could come overnight. Like you said, some could be locked in for 9 months, 6 months, 5 months, if you're really, really about this, because you said with this, don't come into this thinking short term. Don't come into this thinking you're just going to hit a lick and be an overnight success and do all of that. Yes, some deals will be very good for you, very lucrative and very fast. But a lot of those deals will be those long-term, those fortune in the follow-up deals, this painstaking, just making sure that you're doing it. We're getting closer, and then you take some steps back. So with this, how do you continue to remain in the know? How do you continue to just stay up and abreast on knowledge and everything that's kind of going on while still, making money and being successful?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. I'd say I like to, with everything, start big picture and then zoom in. And so, a year ago, there was a lot more uncertainty than there is now. There was a lot more fear in the market about what was going to happen. And so I thought, given that, I should really heavily focus on North Carolina and Florida, or the Southeast at least, because there's so much money moving down there. Prices are still, relatively speaking, very affordable. And so even if things go really wrong in the market, well, my parents are still going to retire and move from Ohio to South Carolina, which they did this year, unless, barring a crazy black swan, that's going to happen. And they're not unique. There's a lot of people doing the same. So first and foremost, I felt more confident staying in the places where a lot of people and money are going and where prices are still low. So that was number one, just big picture. Now, from there, as far as keeping on top of things, that's the beauty of such a high volume business. I mean, we usually have a couple closings a week. We're constantly selling lots all over, and I get a good, just anecdotal idea of what's going on. In this last month, we've seen a huge uptick. I mean, it feels like 2021 still in North Carolina and Florida. Things are just selling and selling. We had a couple that had been sitting forever. They're selling too. The new stuff is selling. Everything's just selling. So there's just, from participating in the market, we get some feedback. And then number three, after doing this for years and doing podcasts and posting on social, I've gotten to know people all over the country doing this. And so It gives me feedback about what people are seeing in different places. So a lot of it is just anecdotal, both myself and the business I'm doing and what I'm hearing from my friends.
I love that. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. And I will definitely attest to you that while the market is crazy, while there are things going, like I feel like just last year, everybody was talking about crash, or it's going to happen, or just hold out or wait, or we'll just see. I can't tell how many people are coming to my job just thinking that they said, just hold on, just wait. If you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about buying, I promise, just wait. Just listen to me. So that's so crazy. But now just to see, like I said, I feel like a realtor is popping up left and right out here. I feel like somebody's doing this, or hey, if you know anybody trying to do this or do that, I see signs everywhere for sale or land or anything. So I definitely do agree with that. In North Carolina, man, the landscape out there is just so different. So I feel like because you have a little bit of everything. You have your city. You have your man. I never really realized until I went to East Carolina University, Greenville, North Carolina, just how much land is out there. There's just a certain point where you know you're on the road to ECU because you don't see anything. So it's just I could definitely imagine just the success there. But something you also talked about too was sometimes things can go wrong. Sometimes things can just not go your way. Sometimes things can take even a little bit longer than expected. Is there ever a point in this game where you just have to let go and let God? Is there ever a point where a deal is just not worth it, where you just have to say, just call it quits, just stop it? It's just not what you want to be a part of. Or do you just also, because you're thinking that, because you know that this is a long-term game, because you know that this is not something that's always going to happen when you want it to happen, do you stick things out? Are there any or I guess I would more so say, are there any red flags that for you would just kind of make you take a step back, or would make you say, you know what, this really may not even be worth it when it's all said and done?
Yeah, so applying that just to markets, one thing I like to look at is just in the last 90 days, you go on Zillow, it's very simple, to your point about simplicity, and go to lots sold, how many were sold in the last 90 days, and then, staying in that same area, then pivot to for sale, and you see how many came on the market in the last 90 days. And when I see, there's a market in North Carolina where over 2 times as many lots had sold in the last 90 days as came on the market, I go, all right, there's demand there, because that is not typical for land. I mean, that is people who don't have a point of reference. That's crazy. That's crazy. And so to the flip side, a friend of mine was looking at a market in Texas where it was the polar opposite. There was like 160 lots for sale, and like 4 had sold in the last 30 or maybe even 90 days, like almost nothing. So if I see that, unless I have some sort of gem where it's like the lot, the last lot in the prestigious neighborhood, or the lot that's right on the water, or something special, I would just stay away from places like that personally.
Okay. Numbers. People lie. Men lie. Women lie. Numbers don't lie, though.
Yes.
I like that a lot. Okay, that's cool. I like that. Now, all right. So something that you've talked about a lot, even in mentioning Pete, is more so like community, or just knowing people, or just having questions, or just having different connect. Like you said, you can do this remotely if you ask the right question, or if you talk to the right people, or if you familiarize yourself with just names, terminology, everything like that. Would you say that the land flipping community is inclusive? Like, it's a thing? Because I'm not going to lie, like I said, joining Pete's land conquest training course that he offers, I see a lot of community in there. I see a lot of people dropping questions. I see a lot of people getting answers, talking about deals, everything like that. Would you say that this is more of a collaboration over competition community? Would you say this is kind of like every man for themselves, but we'll be able to, the experienced people will answer questions, or the big time players don't mind offering themselves the way Pete, yourself, doing things like that? What really is the demographic when it comes to this, like land flipping, land selling, everything that y'all really do within real estate?
Yeah, generally it's very collaborative. I mean, there's always exceptions when you're dealing with any large group of people, but that's been something that's been a lot of fun about it. Is I have plenty of people that do business in some of the same areas I do, where we share what we're doing, how we're doing it. Sometimes we do deals together. Sometimes we just help each other. So yeah, I think it's generally pretty collaborative, and people who don't think that way generally don't last long. And even if they do, their life kind of sucks, in my opinion. I don't particularly want to operate that way. So, I have been happy to find it to be very collaborative.
Collaboration over competition. Dan just said it best. You suck if you don't think that way. You know what I'm saying? So I get that. But no, bro, honestly, I really hear a lot of I hear a lot of potential. I hear a lot of success. I hear a lot of hard work. I hear a lot of dedication. But I also hear just a lot of a selfless approach to this. I really feel like that, you really came on here, and I could really tell that you wanted to break things down. You wanted to even maybe explain some misconceptions or really think or really even simplify things. Because like you said, while things may seem simple, while it may appear that it's just that easy, it also does take you putting in that legwork, that grunt work, really wanting to do this. Like you said, this is a long-term game. This is not, you can have success, you can be a one-hit wonder and everything like that, but that will fade out very quickly. You're not going to keep doing that. Not in this game, not with these markets and the way certain things are looking. You know what I'm saying? So I love to really hear the direction and where you're moving. But something that I always love to focus on, just the same as we even talked about, this is ever changing, ever evolving. You could wake up tomorrow, something could be totally different, have a lead this way. And that property that you've been sitting on for the last 3 to 4 could finally close for you. When you think about the future of everything that comes with this game, of everything that you're even doing now, what does that look like for you? Is Front Range Land trying to get into anything new? I know you said that you're trying to acquire some more rental properties and things like that from your side, but is there anything, because I'm more so thinking too about newcomers. I'm thinking about people who are going to listen to this episode and want to tap in with Dan at Front Range Land now, and now kind of follow this journey, kind of continue along with you guys, and maybe even collaborate and partner with you guys moving forward. Well, what can the people expect? Is there anything that you guys are looking to debut? Any businesses or services? Any just areas that you of the world that you may even want to hit, go international, anything? Obviously, without spoiling anything, I don't want to give away anything that may be a surprise to people or that you may just kind of have in the works. But something I love to do here on top of manifestations and just speaking things into existence, I also love to kind of get a deeper insight as to what companies are thinking, what business models, what are you guys trying to debut or anything like that. So is there anything along those lines that you could share?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, I'm always working to buy more rental properties. I got a seller finance duplex that I'm just going to keep under contract today. Right. But yes, so within the land space, there is a massive gap, right? There's all these people getting land deals. And I bet maybe you can already relate to this talking about that group you're in, but there are no good options for financing land deals, right? Traditional banks don't do it. Some do it if you're going to build a house on it right away. A lot of hard money lenders won't touch it. There's not a ton of private money that's out funding simple land deals. It's not well understood. It's a really inefficient market. So close friend and I are working on putting together a joint venture consulting company that is, number one, the expert and a second set of eyes, but number two, the funder for your land deals. And so this is something we're looking to launch by the end of the year. Ideally, we're really pushing to get this done. We're going to start small, but there's a need for this because the biggest problem that I, and everyone else we know in the land space has is finding capital to fund their deals. So that I'm working at, and really that is the seeds of a much larger long-term endeavor, which really I just want to more be a private equity investor, but that's down the road. So,
woo, okay, you're talking big. Wow, that's I think that oftentimes what can be a lost art when it comes to business ownership and entrepreneurship is also just recognizing where the problems lie within your industry. Because I feel like that's a lot of these inventions, a lot of these companies, a lot of things that were patents that were brought to life was because there was somebody dealing with a problem. There was somebody who noticed a problem. There was somebody who maybe even kept hearing about a problem, kept getting feedback about it. And they were just like, you know what? Well, nobody's really solving this, or the people who are solving it may not be prevalent, or it may not be a solve for everyone. It may solve that person's problem or that person's problem, but what about the collective, the group? So I feel like a lot of times people also, because it's nothing wrong with a massive success, being very good at what you do, loving what you do, enjoying what you do. But sometimes there always should just be that hunger in the back of your head for more, or just recognize, like you said, you want to keep bringing these properties in. But okay, I keep bringing these properties in. How can I become more passive? How can I make, because I'm making money when I sleep. How can I make more money when I sleep? It's a problem. But I also think that people forget that even though you're doing well in this industry, you're doing what you got to do, you love what you do, there are people still facing things. There are even problems that as a successful business owner, entrepreneur, that you can still run into. So I think that was a good approach to really be able to start that. And like you said, build the foundation, start small, start with people that are within your circle, and then be able to build it out from there. So, okay, I'm interested. I'm interested now. I'm very, very interested, because that's like, even when you said it, I was just like, you know what? That's a great point. I'm not even in the land community, but I can definitely tell you from the people that I've talked to, financing and those options, that never really even came up as to how that works, how that goes, who does it, but I can also see why you said why the banks would step away, why other big time investors and lenders would want to step away. But it could be a problem that once they apply themselves or insert themselves, you could be the solution ultimately. You could be that house. You know what I'm saying? So, okay, I love that. And I'm definitely wishing y'all luck with that. And I'm definitely excited to see how that goes. Now, Before we get into all things where it comes to the point where people can tap in with you, how they can find out more information about you, the website, everything like that, do you feel like there is anything that we haven't touched on today? Even any maybe last words that you want to leave for other business owners, entrepreneurs, creatives, land flippers, land investors, sellers, realtors, people who even hear this interview and they're just like, wow, I really knew nothing about the real estate space, but I want passive income and I've always wanted to involve myself in that in some way. Do you feel like there's anything that we just haven't hit today?
Yeah, there's one really important distinction I want to make sure I made clear, because you just said passive income. And what I'm doing with Front Range Land, not passive. This is my active business. And so often people conflate active businesses within real estate and passive investing. So the rental properties I own are pretty passive. I mean, I have a property manager. Occasionally I have to respond to things, but I mean, it's few and far between. So those are mostly passive. That is investing. The duplex I'm buying on Song Sparrow, that's investing. Land, what I'm doing with land development, that is an active business just to make money. And that allows me to then go buy more rental properties, which then shelter this from having to pay taxes on it, right? So two different buckets, and I think those get conflated too often, right? So that's one distinction I want to make. And, really, I think I said the biggest point I ever want to drive home is just go pick something and stick with it. If I was brand new today, I would absolutely invest in real estate. I'd go buy a house hack or something, depending on the position I was in. But my active business might not be Front Range Land. It might be something different. I might go build an insurance agency or something else. But point being, stick with one thing. Pick one thing and get better than everyone else at it in your active business. Because the investing, again, I think of that as separate because I don't really do a whole lot of work there.
Needed that distinction for sure. So thank you. I appreciate that. But no, that's like you said, that it can, I feel like that can get lost in translation. It can get lost few and far between, and people just think that, oh, well, he's just flipping and he's buying and selling. He doesn't have to really do too much. It's all done. No, you still have to maintain that responsibility. You still run a business.
Yeah.
There are a lot of moving parts that come with that. So no, I like that a lot. Dan, honestly, I'm not going to lie. You have been able to provide a lot of value. And even as I kind of told you at the beginning, I was very excited just reading your bio, going through the website, because I just feel like real estate, it's two words, but it encompasses so much. Mm-hmm. Like Airbnbs, land flippers, investors, realtors, people who just kind of want to get that license and that's it, really just be that minimum. People who don't want anything to do with the license, but they want to buy and sell. People who are who want to go the dilapidator route, people who are fixer-uppers. We could get into so many different things, contractors, everything like that. So I love the vastness of this industry, but like I said, I love people's ability, like yourself, like Pete, like Ray, like everybody's ability to then be able to hone in on one particular thing or brand themselves in that way and kind of just go from there. So now, obviously, you said a lot of important things today. You've said things that, I feel like I'm going to have to replay. I'm going to have to take some notes on. I'm going to have to, make sure that I'm also doing my due diligence to make sure moving forward that I'm intentional about it. But I feel like what this part is the most important part, because this is essentially our call to action. This is where where people just listening to the episode because maybe they wanted to hear Tamar and Dan talk, or were they listening to the episode because they want to get some value from this, or they really want to be able to insert themselves. So now, for everybody kind of tapping in, for everybody wanting to find out more about you, about Front Range Land, about what you're doing, about even the upcoming ventures that you have with you and your partners, where can they go? Give me your website, give me your social media, give me the best ways to kind of reach you and tap into everything that you're doing.
DanHabercost.com or Dan Habercost on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And if you want to hear me talk about day-to-day business, the Big Picture Blueprint is my and my buddy's podcast.
All right, y'all. So look, I never take guests lightly. Whenever somebody wants to come on my podcast and connect with me, I love that. Like I said, I have to bring my A game with every interview. But one, we're talking to somebody who is in our depending on which listener you are, I have a spectrum of listeners, but we're talking to somebody who is within my age bracket right now, us both being 27 years old, you know what I'm saying? And we are two different places, two different spaces, two different paths in life, but ultimately we pick something that we love to do and we honed in on it. It's not to say that you can't do the same. It's not to say that even with everything that you're doing now, you still can't be able to add that. You still can't be able to take your active job or take what you're doing actively, throw some passive in there, figure out some things. Like, even if it's nothing more than learning something and being able to teach it to someone else, or being able to provide value, or being able to say, you know what, I had no idea about some of the terminology and some of the things that he was saying. But when I started to look it up, and as I started to go further and further down that rabbit hole, and it really started to make sense to me, I wanted to do this. I really wanted to make this happen. So Dan, I have to really just give you a big thanks. One, just for education, just for the value you wanted to be on here, but two, just for everything that you're doing, just for the amazing things that you're doing in different communities, in communities that you've never even really stepped foot in. And really, just like you said, the experience, you went from doing things for free, from just dedicating time to not really knowing if you would ever even benefit from it in a way. But because you're just that type of person, because you just have that selfless approach to things, you just kept at it, you kept at it, you kept at it. And now look at you. And honestly, you're just scratching the surface, because 6 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, man, the possibilities are endless. And I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to be a part of it, even more so just the venture that you were just talking about at the end of the year.
Yeah.
That's big, man. That's really big, but it also just goes to show where you're thinking, where your mind is. So from me to you, from Down to Business to Front Range Land, thank y'all. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for everything that you'll continue to do. We are locked in. We are tapped in. I'm even going to be reaching out to you to pick your brain about some things, because like I said, I've been kind of dealing with this with Pete just the same, but I have my questions. I've been in that community, but I'm watching you now. You're on my radar. I'm definitely kind of following along the journey. And to everybody else who's here with you, who's tapping in, whether you've been with Dan for a while, whether you've been on my side now and you're tapping in with Dan, or whether you're tapping in with both of us for the first time, thank you. We love you. We appreciate you. And this has been another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner.